Pyrrhus's army had been seriously weakened by the time it returned to southern Italy, especially after taking additional losses on the seas. This was not helped by the loss of Samnite support. Since Pyrrhus left southern Italy, the Samnites who rose up with his arrival had to keep on fighting. They suffered many crucial defeats holding back Rome, with no help from the Pyrrhic king, and so when Pyrrhus returned, refused to fight for the man who they felt had abandoned them. His position was weak, and so he reached out for aid to the new Macedonian king, Antigonus II Gonatas, but he refused to send aid. And so, with a lack of veteran troops, allies and a smart Roman opponent that had adapted to deal with elephant charges, Pyrrhus suffered a defeat at the Battle of Beneventum. After this defeat, he retreated back to Tarentum and then back home to Epirus, leaving behind a decent garrison. The king was financially exhausted, but Pyrrhus did not return for peace. Instead, more war was upon him. He decided to conquer his wealth, and where best to conquer than the land that had not so recently wished him to be king, and was currently ruled by Antigonus II Gonatas, the man who had refused Pyrrhus' aid. Pyrrhus invaded Macedon, although perhaps it is safe to consider the possibility that Pyrrhus was trying to amend his support with the gods. Remember, he was offered the throne of Macedon at around the same time. Syracuse requested his aid. Perhaps he saw he made the wrong call. He did believe he was cursed from time to time. Maybe he saw going after Macedon as his chance to correct fortune and bring the gods back in his favour. There was an event back in Syracuse where he plundered a temple for its gold, but that gold was then washed away in a storm. He then offered the goddess from which he stole sacrifices and executed the men who had persuaded him to ransack the holy site. I say this as it is important to consider geopolitics, especially back then in the ancient world, was much more religiously inclined than today. Stuff like fate, destiny, the will of the gods through the oracle were all considered in the equation. In addition, due to the lack of sources or heavy source bias when we do get them in the ancient world, we must use our imaginations. Pyrrhus won the battle and believed the war near enough over. He became a king of Macedon, but did not finish the job, leaving himself open along the Aegean coast. Not only that, but he left his Gallic mercenaries in the ancient capital, Aegea, who dug up the graves of old kings, looted their treasures, and left the bones scattered across the earth. This greatly offended many of the Macedonian nobles whose loyalty Pyrrhus depended upon. Pyrrhus, as we found out in the first episode, was a great commander with a unique mind when it came to strategical geopolitics, but a bad diplomat to foreign neighbours and to his own subjects. Pyrrhus, before finishing his victory over Macedon, received an offer from the prominent Spartan Cleonymus. This man wished to be king of Sparta. If Pyrrhus put him there, then the Epirot would have a puppet on the Spartan throne. In addition, the Spartan army was all the way in Crete fighting another war. Basically, Pyrrhus invaded, but the people put up a great resistance. The Spartan army returned, his men began deserting, so he retreated and sacked the land instead. We now briefly zoom to Argos. The two most powerful men in the city were rivals. One, Aristippus, was a friend and ally of Antigonus II, so the other, Aristes, requested aid from Pyrrhus. Antigonus II, who Pyrrhus had failed to finish off, built up his army and set off for Argos to meet his old rival. The local feud had extended into a show of strength between two greater rivals. The Spartans, angry at Pyrrhus, joined Antigonus in battle and won, resulting in the death of Pyrrhus of Epirus. The Epirot king died from being hit by a roof tile thrown by the elderly mother of one of the soldiers. I really wish I know what happened to that old woman after. Imagine being her and telling the story to your local knitting club on how you killed the great Pyrrhus. With that, the Epirot army surrendered, ending the war. Antigonus found Helenus, Pyrrhus' son, disguised and sneaking away. He was treated well, in fact, as an honoured guest, and then sent back to Epirus. Peace was secured, however only temporarily, but that will be possibly for another video. Antigonus, for the time, had secured his position on the throne of Macedon, whilst expanding Macedonian power over Argos, strengthening his influence over the southern Greeks. Tarentum, surrounded on land by Rome and on the seas by Carthage, literally the worst combination possible, surrendered, thus ending the Pyrrhic War and securing Roman hegemony over southern Italy. The Epirots were allowed to leave freely with their money too. Tarentum was forced to destroy their own walls, preventing any funny business, and forced to pay tribute. The pulling down of the walls was a symbolic move, representing the end of Tarentine independence, as it was incorporated into the whole. One could also argue it shows us the Roman mistrust for them, expecting them to rise up at the first chance they got. Finally, the victory of Rome brought the Republic great prestige across the Greek world, and arguably marked the start of Rome as being a great power in the Mediterranean, so much so that Ptolemy II of Egypt sent envoys to Rome and rewarded lavishly the Roman envoys who visited Alexandria, a sign of recognition among the greats. Arguably the ego boost they needed to dare war against Carthage in the Pyrrhic Wars. But I've done a whole series on the geopolitics and diplomacy of those events already. Fun fact, the city of Pyrrhi, where this series began, after inviting the Romans down to rid themselves of Tarentine domination, would later side with Hannibal when he stormed his way through southern Italy. Ancient Greeks. They can never be happy, can they? I hope you enjoyed and learnt something. Leave a like if you did, subscribe for more, share with anyone you think may be interested. It really helps me out. But for now, until next week's video, this has been the history of diplomacy.